The Ukrainian counteroffensive is back in the news as reports of military attacks emerge from the front lines. What direction will the Ukraine war take? The Biden administration in the United States has reached a debt ceiling deal that will be another blow to millions of people with student debt. And finally, why are Israeli authorities refusing to heed calls to release Palestinian leader Walid Daqqa? Welcome to Daily Debrief. I'm your host Shriya and these are today's stories. As Ukrainian forces began pushing forward the front line with Russia, rumors of the highly anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive are rife. In the fighting, a dam and hydroelectric power plant in a Russian-controlled part of southern Ukraine has been destroyed, sparking fears of flooding. While Ukrainian and Russian officials accuse each other for the destruction of the Kakhovka dam, there is a risk to the nearby nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. To decode the latest development, we go to Prabir Purkayastha, who joins us in studio now. Thank you for joining us, Prabir. First off, where is the counteroffensive taking place and if it is taking place?
Well, the Ukrainian counteroffensive has been hyped for quite some time. And when we had discussed these issues earlier, we had said that the chances of this, if and when it does happen, will be on the strip of land which connects essentially Russia to Crimea via certain oblasts of Ukraine. And that's really Kherson, Zaporizhia, this side it was Donetsk. All of this is that's where the possibility of severing the connection to Russia is there. And if you go below that, of course, there is the Kerch Bridge, but there is no question that this is a much more secure and a much wider conduit for connecting Crimea to Russia. So this is one part, and that's where the offensive seems to be taking place. If you look at the map, you will see there are two axes of attacks, maybe three, but two axes of attacks really, which are prominent. One is, of course, taking place more towards the Zaporizhia, Kherson side, and the other is basically looking at Melitopol as the somewhere that's where it's going to be, and there is one nearer Donetsk as well. So these are the three axes. This is going to come up against Russian lines, fortified lines. They have been fortifying for quite some time. They have three layers of defenses over there. So we'll have to see how that shapes up. Yes, there have been some fighting over there. They would, if you make a concerted attack at a certain point, the line would go back, okay? But how far they would go back and how long they can stay there, that's a question. And does it mean the breaching the first line, the second line and the third line? Till they breach the third line, the way to Melitopol or severing that connection does not exist. So this is where at the moment the fighting seems to be. It's still very much between the first line of defense and the border between at the moment Russian forces and Ukrainian forces. So this is where the battle seems to be. How much of the forces are involved? What is the nature of the attack? How serious it's going to be? How much of this is the same, this talked about counter-offensive, or is it just probing attacks? That we have to wait and watch. As you know, fog of war always is there. So we don't really know till the events take place which make it definitive. We still don't know where these things are. But the other part of this attack is also the fact that the dam near Kherson has been breached, and a lot of the area on the Russian occupied side has been now drowned, or water is there. This creates all kinds of problems. And there is also the risk of it entering the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, which is close by. So this is, of course, not a simple issue, because though the nuclear plant is in cold shutdown, but it still needs supply of water, it still needs to be maintained. So therefore, if water enters there, then there is going to be a problem. So that is one part of it, and if such a scenario takes place, then everybody is going to be in trouble. So that's one part. Secondly, the water to Crimea goes from the dam. And if the level comes down, then the flow of water to Crimea gets disturbed. So what will happen to Crimean water supply is also a question mark. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But the way the Ukrainian side has been also focusing on talking about the dam bursting while saying Russians have done this, it seems to indicate that possibly it is in their interest to have the dam burst, and that's what had been a threat earlier when, if you remember, Russian forces withdrew from the Kherson city. So it does seem to indicate that there is a possibility, more the possibility of Ukrainian side having breached the dam. So this is where the offensive is. There are some offenses near Bakhmut and so on. Okay, Bakhmut has been on the focus of war for a very long time, so I'm not going to discuss it further. I don't think there is any significant change there likely to happen. But this is the new theatre, and we'll have to see how it pans out.
Right, and you also mentioned about how we've been hearing about this Ukrainian counteroffensive for nearly 3 months. Lot of talk about it, lot of hype, but whom does it help?
Well, one of it, if a counteroffensive of this kind does not take place, then it's difficult more and more for countries like Germany, United States, even United Kingdom, France and others to continue to support Ukraine with military supplies, advanced military weapons. They are really drawing down on their existing stockpile of what they have. In fact, the argument is that a lot of their stockpile is near exhaustion, and the United States cannot produce, and the other countries cannot produce at the rate Ukraine is losing its stock of weapons or losing it in the fighting. So given this, to justify the amount of military support they have to give to Ukraine, and also the fact that the budget, the Ukrainian budget, is probably more than 50%, if not, being now supported by NATO countries, including the United States and other European countries who may not be a part of NATO. So this is also a huge drain on these countries' finances supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is not a small country. It is a large country, and therefore supporting the entire governmental expenditure, or even 50% of that, is a significant cost. And the amount of military weapons they are requiring, the losing of tanks, replenishing that with the tanks. First replenishment was using old Soviet tanks from other East European countries. Now they have been replenished with tanks from advanced capitalist countries. You have France, England, Germany, United States giving it tanks. So all of it means that if they have nothing to show for it, if Ukraine has nothing to show for it, not even a counteroffensive, the question will come up, why are you spending so much money? Should you not look for peace? Should it be a frozen conflict? Will the support of the other countries be there for supporting Ukraine at this scale? I think these are the reasons why the optics of a counteroffensive is very important for Ukraine and for the NATO countries as well. Otherwise, the support from this population of these countries may come down. And already we have Trump in the elections in the United States. Similar forces may come up in Europe saying that we should start looking for peace. The war is not going to help us. Let's have some kind of arrangement and so on. I think that's the reason that counteroffensive was hyped up, and why this counteroffensive is something Ukraine needs to show for all the support it has received, both military and financial. Otherwise, the support of the European as well as the American people might dwindle.
Thank you once again for joining us today, Prabir, for this story. On June 1st, US senators from the Republican and Democrat parties approved the bipartisan debt ceiling deal. Republicans, led by Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, negotiated severe cuts on government spending in a way that will hurt workers the most out of any class. This will be by kicking millions off of food and health benefits, cutting the IRS, making it easier for the wealthy to evade taxes, and officially putting an end date to the current freeze on student loan payments. The codification of an end to the student debt payments pause, which will be terminated in September this year, will put millions of borrowers in a deeply precarious financial position. We are joined by Natalia Marquez, who has more details on the impact on student loan borrowers. Hi Natalia, thanks for joining us. So, how does the debt ceiling deal affect student loan borrowers?
So on Thursday night, on June 1st, Republicans and Democrats in Congress pushed through a bipartisan debt ceiling deal, which will cut government spending in a way that pretty much only hurts the working class. So there are many provisions in this debt ceiling deal that ostensibly are there to limit government spending, like kicking millions of people off of food and health benefits, cutting the tax services to make it easier for rich people to avoid taxes and therefore costing the government more money, actually. And officially putting an end date to the current freeze on student loan payments, which will definitively end on September 1st. And so what that means for the millions of people in the US who owe student loan debt is that after September the 1st, they have to restart their student loan payments that, several studies have shown that a large amount of those millions cannot afford, right? So people are going to have to forego healthcare, cancer treatments. They're going to have to forego mortgage payments. They might even become more food or housing insecure because they're going to have to start paying their student loans again. Biden has been attempting to push through a up to $20,000 student loan forgiveness plan, but conservatives have successfully pushed back against those efforts and hamstrung that program. It has not been able to be implemented yet because of those efforts, right? So since August 2022, Biden has been trying to push through the student loan forgiveness program. Thus far, no student loans have been forgiven through this program at all. This program could have eliminated debt for 20 million people. It would have been huge, but it has not happened, right? Let's say that the Supreme Court strikes down Biden's program and they decide to strike it down after September the 1st. That means that all those millions of people that are not able to pay their student loan debt, they're going to still have to pay, even though Biden tried to push through this program, right? It's likely that the Supreme Court's going to strike down the program, and it's also likely that Biden will counter by trying to find another way to forgive student loan debt. But after September the 1st, there's no way that Biden can provide any sort of pause to payments. So, the Debt Collective on Twitter explained this well. They're saying that even if the Biden administration encounters a new reason why debt payments should still be paused, maybe there's some incorrect information, maybe new information is discovered, it doesn't matter. They've sealed the deal. They've hamstrung their own efforts because the end to the pause is codified and there's no changing that now because of the debt ceiling deal.
Can you also tell us why did Biden administration negotiate with Republicans?
Biden negotiated with Republicans ostensibly because he wanted to avoid a government default and limit government spending with the debt ceiling deal. But Bernie Sanders and other progressives are arguing that Biden could have taken his own executive action to avoid a government default without getting into this deal. He could have invoked the 14th Amendment, and he could have also called the bluff of the Republicans and conservatives, said, you're really going to force millions of people off of government benefits because you want to avoid a default? Well, then, we're going to fight this and we're going to call your bluff and see if you actually are going to do this thing or if you, want to avoid the default, right? So essentially make Republicans responsible for the government default because of a steadfast refusal to cut back on government benefits for people and to end the student loan pause. But Biden didn't do this, right? He negotiated with the conservatives and negotiated a deal that will affect millions, right? Student loan debtors in particular are a very precarious part of the U.S. population. Despite a lot of rhetoric against people who own student loans, against student loan forgiveness programs, this conservative rhetoric that says that working class people are going to pay off the debt of people who have college degrees, right? Student loan debtors are working class people as well. They experience food insecurity at a 61% higher rate than the rest of the country. They are struggling to pay for healthcare and medicine at a rate that increased by 34% between 2020 and 2022. And the rate, or the percentage rather, of those who could not afford rent increased by 17% in the same time period. And student loan borrowers are 8 times more likely to be housing insecure than the rest of the country. A survey in 2022 found that 3 out of 5 borrowers could not afford resumed payments. And the average public university student, not even private, just public, borrows over $30,000 just to obtain a bachelor's degree. And in the United States, as well as in the rest of the world, increasingly, even low-paying jobs are requiring college degrees, bachelor's degrees. So this is a large part of the working class. Also, student loan forgiveness programs are popular in the United States. 55% of people in the U.S. support student loan forgiveness of up to $10,000 per person, and 47% support student loan forgiveness of $50,000 per person. Biden's student loan forgiveness program would have forgiven up to $20,000 per person, which would have zeroed out the accounts of 20 million people. But now it's looking really bad for student loan borrowers in the United States.
Thanks for that, Natalia. And with that, we move on to our second story. Palestinians are protesting to demand the release of Palestinian leader, novelist, and intellectual Walid Daqqa from Israeli prison. The Israeli Prison Service Parole Committee rejected his release at a session held in Ramleh prison on Wednesday, May 31st. Daqqa, who has been serving a 37 years long sentence for allegedly killing an Israeli soldier, is facing deteriorating health conditions in imprisonment. He was diagnosed with advanced bone marrow cancer in December last year, in addition to previously being diagnosed with leukemia in 2015. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza have been organizing protests and other collective actions for Daqqa's release and treatment. We take this discussion forward with Abdul now, who joins us in studio. Thanks for joining us today, Abdul. So we know that Walid Daqqa has been in prison for a very long time. So why are the Israeli authorities, they are denying him any sort of relief given that his health conditions are deteriorating at a very fast pace?
Well, to answer that question, there are two ways to look at it. Of course, there is one which is the usual occupation policy of not releasing Palestinian prisoners for a very long time. It's a deliberate attempt to harass them, keeping Palestinians within the jail for as long as possible. So the current police minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, have been basically talking about how he should die within the jail and he should not come out. No prisoner Palestinian should be allowed to go out of the prison. So that is part of the larger occupation policy. But there is another angle to it, which basically the family members of the soldier for which he is accused to have killed him or been involved in his murder, have been pursuing a case against Daqqa that he should not be released prematurely, despite the fact that his medical condition is well known, despite the fact that he has been suffering from one of those terminal diseases which cannot be cured, and he needs proper medical care. And it is impossible to kind of do that within the clinic which is there inside the prison in Ramla. So it is both. It's basically, you can say, it's the fact that the family members of the Israeli soldier pursuing a case against Daqqa helps the Israeli state to pursue its own oppressive, inhuman policies vis-a-vis Palestinian prisoners. So this is how one should look at it.
Abdul, you also mentioned how this is something that Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, this is not something new. They have faced it for a long time, and some have even died within the jails facing worsening health conditions. So what is really Israel trying to attempt here?
Basically, it is a way to convey the message that resistance against the occupation is not acceptable, and those who are trying to do that will be subjected to all kinds of inhuman treatment. So torture, illegal detention, mistreatment, denying of medical facilities, denying of basic facilities of visitation and all. So this is all justified by Israel in the name of what it calls basically against the Palestinian quote-unquote terrorism. But it is not terrorism. Of course, everyone knows the Palestinians are basically resisting their colonial occupation, Zionist occupation of their land, and Israel is trying to prevent it as much as possible. So it uses all these tactics, illegal tactics, inhuman tactics, to basically demoralize the Palestinian resistance.
Right, and I think in addition to this, we've also got to remember that with good health or not good health, all the Palestinian prisoners are deprived of essential services within the jails.
Exactly.
Right.
So they're not allowed, most of the Palestinian prisoners are not allowed basic rights which are prescribed in the international law, and that has been, by and large, Israel has been doing it without any repercussion.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Abdul. And that's all we have for today. For more such stories, keep watching peoplesdispatch.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.